We're starting today with a direct update, because since we first reported this story, an official statement has been released. I'm going to read it to you in full. This was shared on Bill Gothards' Facebook page, described as an official press release. It reads, Bill Gothards suffered a heart attack on June 24th, and, as a result, went into a natural coma. He was revived and taken by ambulance to the hospital. Per his wishes, we have been doing every medical, life-saving procedure possible to save his life. Right now he is alive, and though his kidneys quit functioning, by an absolute miracle, they started to function again, as per a kidney specialist. A former staff member was visiting, and he squeezed their finger. Today, he has been squeezing multiple people's hands, at their request. We covet your prayers for his complete restoration, either here, if God has more time of ministry for him, or if God takes pleasure in taking his saint home soon. Either way, will be a good outcome for him. Thanks to everyone who has prayed and sent blessings his way. That is the official word from his circle as of now. There's a phrase in there I want to sit with for a moment before we go any further. Either way, will be a good outcome for him. We're going to come back to that, because there are people for whom the outcome of this story is not quite so tidy, and they deserve to be part of this conversation too. First, let's establish exactly who Bill Gothard is, what he built, and what that word ministry actually meant for the people who lived inside it. Because before we go any further, we need to talk about who Bill Gothard actually is, and what he built. Starting in the 1960s, Gothard developed a teaching system he called Basic Life Principles, 7 universal laws: design, authority, responsibility, suffering, ownership, freedom, success, which he claimed were drawn directly from Scripture. He turned them into a seminar. The first one, held in Seattle in 1968, drew 42 people. Within a few years, he was filling arenas. By 1973, roughly 200,000 people attended a Gothard seminar in a single year. Families drove hours. Teenagers sat through 32-hour, 6-day sessions, taking notes in thick red binders. Christianity Today called him an evangelical guru. No music, no special guests, just Gothard and an overhead projector. And somehow, thousands of people sat in rapt attention. The ministry was renamed Institute in Basic Life Principles in 1989, and it kept growing. IBLP peaked in the late 1990s and remained influential well into the 2000s. The appeal wasn't complicated. As Wheaton theology professor Emily Hunter McGowan wrote in 2023, parents in an era of cultural upheaval found in Gothard a person with straightforward answers, which came, it seemed, directly from God. Certainty amid uncertainty. Stability amid instability. But the order Gothard sold came at a price. His theology placed enormous weight on hierarchy and submission. Children submit completely to parents. Wives submit to husbands. Men submit to church, workplace, government. He described authority as an umbrella, protection from satanic storms. Step out from under it, he taught, and you're exposed. One seminar handout reportedly instructed children who had been sexually abused to ask themselves whether God allowed it to happen because they were out from under protection. Read that again. Now, if you're newer to this story, you may have first encountered IBLP not through a seminar brochure, but through a reality TV show. The Duggar family, Jim Bob, Michelle, and their 19 children, made famous by TLC's 19 Kids and Counting, were among the most visible public faces of IBLP's teachings. Jim Bob Duggar was a devoted follower of Gothard. The family enrolled their children in ATI, Advanced Training Institute, Gothard's homeschool curriculum, which extended his authority and submission framework directly into the home. For millions of viewers, the Duggars were the public image of what this lifestyle looked like. Large, happy, orderly, God-fearing. Modest dress, courtship instead of dating, clear gender roles. The kind of certainty McGowan described, visible and televised every week. What viewers didn't see was what the framework produced behind closed doors. In 2015, it emerged that Josh Duggar, the family's eldest son, had molested 5 underage girls as a teenager, including his own sisters. The scandal ended the show. But the deeper story was the system that had shaped the family's response to it. One built around submission to authority, protection of hierarchy, and keeping things within the community, rather than reporting them externally. That's IBLP's fingerprints. Jinger Duggar Vuolo, one of the daughters, eventually wrote a book about her experience escaping that world. She told People magazine that Gothards' teachings left her crippled with anxiety and terrified of life outside the system. "The fear kept me paralyzed," she said. "I'm seeing more of the effects of that in the lives of my friends and people who grew up in that community with me."
In a nutshell, it was based on fear, superstition, really leaving you in a place where you feel like, I don't know what God expects of me. He could be pleased with me one day, or he's just like angry at me the next. Even as someone who believes in God and as a child of God, it's like it was so confusing. And the fear kept me crippled with anxiety, not sure where to turn.
The Duggars were the window, IBLP was the house, and it had serious structural problems long before the cameras arrived. The cracks in Gothards' world started showing in 1980, when Christianity Today reported that his brother Steve had confessed to sensual affairs with women who worked for the ministry and was forced to resign, and that Gothard had known about the abuse and covered it up for at least 5 years. Gothard stepped down briefly, then returned to full control 3 weeks later. 2 years later, the Los Angeles Times reported that staff members had witnessed Gothard himself patting and fondling female employees. One of those witnesses was Gary Smalley, Gothards' own top lieutenant at the time, who later wrote to Gothard in 2009 describing what he personally saw: Gothard holding a female employee on his lap while she was in a nightgown, ready for bed. Smalley's letter asked Gothard directly, "What kind of legacy do you want to leave?" That question went unanswered for another decade. In 2014, Gothard finally resigned from IBLP after confessing to what he called crossing the boundaries of discretion with young women in the organization, holding hands, hugging, touching feet and hair. He insisted none of it was illegal, immoral, or sexual. The women who experienced it described something different. A former employee from 1999 to 2000 recalled what it was like to have Gothard insist she sit with him, share intimate details of her life, and then feel his foot moving up her leg under the table during meals. "You couldn't get away from this," she said. "That got really uncomfortable." In 2016, a group of former employees filed suit, accusing Gothard of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and institutional cover-up. And just last year, 2 women in Texas sued IBLP directly, calling it a conspiracy, arguing that its teachings trained women and girls to be readily available, compliant victims, and that its doctrines on authority and suffering became a blueprint for fathers and brothers to abuse daughters and sisters within the community. That lawsuit is still in court. So let's return to where we started. The official statement says that whether Gothard recovers or doesn't, it will be a good outcome for him. And from a purely theological standpoint, you can understand what they mean by that. But I'd gently suggest there are other people for whom the outcome matters too. People who are not mentioned anywhere in that statement. The women who sat on that couch, the employees who filed suit, the survivors who grew up inside ATI and are still in therapy processing what that world did to them, the 2 women in Texas whose lawsuit is still working its way through the courts. For them, the outcome of this story is not simply a matter of whether God calls his saint home. When Holly McLean wrote in that Facebook group that she hopes Gothard recovers to see the exoneration of his good name, she's asking for a world where all of that simply doesn't count, where the documented cover-up, the witness testimony from his own lieutenant, the years of reported pattern behavior, none of it matters. That's not exoneration. That's erasure. Bill Gothard is 91 years old. His kidneys failed and then, reportedly, recovered. He is squeezing hands. He may survive this. At this channel, we don't celebrate anyone's suffering, including his. But we also don't sanitize history, because someone is fighting for their life. The legacy he left is not a question mark. It is a documented record. Millions of people reached. A theology that systematized submission in ways that left survivors with lasting trauma. And decades of alleged abuse that his own institution failed to address. Gary Smalley asked him in 2009 what kind of legacy he wanted to leave. The statement released this week calls him God's saint. The survivors have a different word for it. We'll keep following this story as it develops.